Hello there folks, my name is Ahsoka Wallace. I am hosting the Aberdeen Neurodiversity panel talk. I started as a bartender 8 years ago here in Aberdeen at Mac Cameron's, where I worked in the snug pouring pints and whiskies for all Scottish men. And I've travelled across the UK. I've bartended down in Wales and London, and I am currently down in London right now doing a lot of work around equality, diversity, inclusion. I'm here today as myself, supporting equal measures as a member, and essentially doing these neurodiversity talks so that we can have more open conversations around individuals within the industry. I'm joined by Lisa and Leon today. I'm very thankful to be able to be here today, thanks to Cascabel, Compass Box and Lies, doing these talks. And essentially the hope is by having more talks around neurodiversity, we can essentially have a bigger discussion around equality, diversity, inclusion within hospitality, as we know how important the industry is and the community is, but we also hope to make better change so that the industry in the future and the more long-term picture is that it is still standing, especially against some of the challenges that we face today. I was diagnosed at a young age, thanks to my parents. I was diagnosed with autism, which again has made such a big difference because as we've gotten older and the information about neurodiversity has become more freely accessible, it is a lot harder for people who are older to get late diagnoses. Now, however, if the information that is around today was the same, say 10 years ago, I would have had a much different school experience. I would have been able to realize when I was having things like a sensory overload, I would have really struggled, not had as much struggles, I would be able to communicate better than some of the training the teachers had when I was younger. But I'm very thankful that I've got a very supportive family and friends who really helped me and grow over the years. We'll say that working in hospitality has really opened my eyes and into the world that we are. And again, being part of Equal Measures has done that. I started bartending properly about 4 years ago after leaving the army. And when I first started bartending, I was reading books, I was doing cocktail competitions, and I absolutely loved it. It was a really big part of my life. Until I essentially started struggling with workplaces, I fell into a housing crisis and I started really struggling with depression, where I was self-harming a lot and stuff like that. And it was really difficult for me to figure out what I want in the industry, and this is because sometimes, especially neurodivergent individuals can really struggle to communicate their needs and wants, and when you're working with individuals who aren't receptive to that, you can often be pushed to one side and face discrimination. I faced discrimination for being autistic, for being non-binary and stuff like that. I've had to write complaints, letters and stuff like that. It's awful because it makes you feel so little and it feels like you're not part of, you're not wanted. And 2 years ago, I very much moved back to Aberdeen to start everything again. And thanks to having a mentorship with Paul Matthew from Everleaf and through Equal Measures and doing qualifications, it's really changed my life and turned it back onto track, where I'm now here getting to do these talks and recognising the barriers and stuff like that. And so I'm here today to try and helpfully move the industry forward, but also make sure no one will have the same experiences that I had, and that we can put toxic and discriminatory behaviour in its tracks and stop it right there, instead of this old school mentality of things are hard, you just have to work through it, or tough, and it's absolutely awful. I'm going to let Lisa and Leon introduce themselves and tell them a bit more about their stories. Lisa, if you want.
Hi, I'm Lisa McLeod. I'm the General Manager of Under the Hammer in Aberdeen. I just took over that role at the end of April, so it's just been about 4 months or so now. And it's quite interesting to see the kind of shift in how my ADHD works as a manager as opposed to being a bartender as I had been in previous roles, and also how to sort of learn how to lead a team as well as work with them and really communicate my needs, as learning how to sort of navigate working life with ADHD. Different to Ahsoka, I am actually undiagnosed, but in the process of a diagnosis right now. It takes quite a long time as an adult, and particularly a female adult. I spent a lot of time with my schooling being in like the 90s, early 2000s, which maybe wasn't as welcoming, as aware of how these different abilities affect different groups. And I think as well, had there been I had understood that when I was younger, I might be in a different mindset now. However, I'm learning a lot. I actually do attend a psychotherapy group who work with mindfulness as a cognitive behavioural therapy, which has actually really, really helped me in the last couple of years and has really put a big help on learning how to work with ADHD within the industry, and also sort of undo some of the bad habits and bad mindsets that I myself am in, and sort of understanding now how to speak to managers or supervisors, owners of companies, about how to really work with their staff. And it's still an ongoing thing. I'm learning every day with different bits and pieces, and just trial and error and learning as we go. All experiences useful, whether it be negative or positive, and yeah, just trying to learn how to work with my strengths and weaknesses. Also having a different way of thinking to other people is quite interesting, and yeah, just learning how to work with different members of the team and their needs, and how to make sure that we're all kind of feeling happy and content within our jobs and taking the breaks we need. I've definitely been prone to periods of burnout because I've set too high standards for myself, or just really not learned how to deal with my ADHD properly. But yeah, that's kind of a brief intro to where I'm at just now.
Hi everyone, my name is Neil Milksback. I am the head of mixology at the Virgin Hotel in Edinburgh, a former Aberdeen bartender. I started my career here 12 years ago, and I was very lucky to be brought up by a fantastic Scottish hospitality community. Since then I had moved down to Edinburgh, cut my teeth in the trade down there, and was lucky enough to then go and work in London, some fantastic cocktail bars and hotel bars. I'm now back in Edinburgh. I am a neurodivergent thinker, as they say. I have not only got dyslexia and dyspraxia, which I was diagnosed at a young age, about 7. I have been recently diagnosed with ADHD as an adult. I can feel the length of diagnosis. I get you, I feel you. But it's been a fantastic journey to almost reawaken a part of my brain that's focused on learning something new about yourself. Doesn't mean that's easy, but it's been a fantastic thing to discover how I think, how I act, how I behave in a way that I didn't understand clearly before. Dyslexia and dyspraxia are very much either motor function or numbers and letters, but ADHD is a very different side of it. For me, I'm not necessarily your hyperactive ADHD type, as much as I can definitely go to that space. It's very much an organizational time management thing that I struggle with. But being in the hospitality industry is an incredibly creative industry, full of amazing characters, full of great people, and I think the neurodiverse part of our industry is actually the heartbeat of that. It's very much a case of everybody thinks differently, and that's what's contributed to having so many incredible venues, concepts, ideas, delicious cocktails, great food, and incredible characters that we all either look up to or work next to in the industry. And I think it's a really great thing that we're talking about it in a space where, what is neurodiversity in the hospitality industry? What does it mean? What does it mean for operators? What does it mean for teams, leaders, staff? But also at the same time, what impact does it have? Both sides, negative or positive, that we can understand. Because the more we understand, just like learning about how your brain works, whether it be ADHD, autism, or dyslexia or dyspraxia, we all think differently. Yeah. And ultimately, when we learn more about how we individually think with whatever neurodivergent title we have, the better we can understand not only how we work, but also how we can work with others, and also others that may have that as well.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's a bit of me.
Awesome. So yeah, I definitely feel like having these talks are very important, because we can as you say, with owners, operators, teams and stuff like that. Everyone's different, and again, it's trying to get across how can we systematically make more inclusive changes. The best example I can give are spec tests. For when I was starting out in the industry about 8 years ago, I saw a lot of spec tests that had to be, here's a piece of paper, write it down, you have to get 90%, that's it. If you don't do that,
Old school.
you're out straight away. However, the more I've learned myself, and I feel like it does take a bit of teaching, because you do have to understand your own brain as well and go through your own discovery, that I'm actually very good verbally and pictures make a lot of sense to me. So now when I do spec tests, I tell people, great, I'm happy to do a spec test, but I need to do it verbally. And we need to actually have a talk. And it takes maybe like an hour of a bar manager's day with you just to stand behind the bar, pick up every single bottle, go through it, because if you can walk yourself through something, it's almost like you're teaching yourself. And for some people, it's easier. But the problem is we can't. Now, the big problem I find is while it's easy to go, wait, I'm at this, you might not be, and so we can't just have you can't just textbook everything for one way. It needs to be, you have to be open to the idea of having different options for things.
One size doesn't fit all. It's very much having that, very similar issues I've had in the past as learning spec tests. Being dyslexic and dyspraxic, stuff on paper can be a different language. It's like hieroglyphics sometimes. My high school friends used to call it Leon language, the way I used to text them. Made zero sense. Very much a case of they would get it after a few years of getting to know me. But for me as well, same for learning, I'm very visual, I'm very audio, and I'm very motor function.
Yeah.
So for me, memorizing specs or recipes or even steps of service on the floor, doing is a lot better than reading or writing.
I was about to say that's my kind of go-to phrase to explain to people if they're trying to teach me something, or they go, right, the instructions are written down over there. I'm like, cool, but I'm a learner by doing. And that's the phrase I use quite a lot to sort of communicate to others. Like, fair enough, you can show me this, but until I'm physically doing it, and like you were saying about the motor functions, it's the same with learning specs. People will say to me, at one point I worked in 2 different venues, and they were going, how do you remember all the cocktails for this and all the cocktails for that, and 2 special menus? I'm like, well, I'll tell you right now, the 2 menus I know are because I've done them and I've made them. The 2 specials menus, I'm going to be looking at that bit of paper with the specs written down on it until I've made about 20 of them, and then I might remember.
Another thing I've noticed as well, you being a manager in the industry or in a venue, when you start writing menus or creating menus and you create recipes, because it's come from a creative place, the memory retention is so much higher even though it's written.
Yes.
So that's what I've been doing in the Virgin Hotels. I've been curating cocktail menus for the past couple of years, and I've noticed I've written specs for new menus. We launched a wee seasonal change of our menu last week, and I know the specs before making the drinks because I've been the one who started them from ground up, and it's almost embedded in my brain. I've justified why every single measure is there, and I then know the measure because I've planned that out.
You've seen each piece of the journey.
Well, exactly, and I've not necessarily picked up the bottles, but I've created it from start to finish. So then for me, I'm going, okay, cool, why is this drink doing this? I've started from this point, and then this is the end point. It kind of gives me a path to follow.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you've got a blank sheet of paper, as a neurodivergent thinker, a blank sheet of paper can be so many amazing creative things, but we're, excuse my French, a bit shit at starting it. Like you can start, either you can't start or you start a million things and don't finish them. But if you're given verbal, you're given physical instruction and teaching, the retention of memory seems to be so much better. And that's great that if you know that and empower yourself as a leader to understand how you work, you can best position yourself to then ask how your team does.
Yeah. And one of the things I think that we are a little bit shit at in the industry is actually accepting kind of barriers for some people. When I worked at Kilcoy, I was really thankful that I had quite a good management team, that when I started behind the bar, I really didn't like their points. Like, I just couldn't bartend there. It was just too noisy. There was so much, and it was weird. I worked in noisy bars before, but it was the fact that I felt there was so much pressure because of all the little steps of service, every little detail that they want you to do and focus on. which I was fine at when I was on. It was interesting of where essentially they believed in initially. They very much had the belief of, cool, when you start on a bar, you do point and then you work your way down to dispense. However, I did my first point shift and it was awful. I hated it. I ended up crying because I really struggled with it. However, it was interesting because 2 years later it was a really quiet shift, and Simone got me to do dispense, and he went, "You're really good at dispense. You do everything methodically." I'm like, "Yeah, because I'm focused on what I'm doing in front of me. I don't have to speak to anyone. I don't have to look anyone in the eyes or try and talk to guests. You want me to make that drink. I will control the order. The bartender next to me will assist me, and I can see every little detail about what's happening, and I don't have to get this out." And it was really great because when it started getting busier, I never had to do point again because Simone was very much like, don't disturb Ahsoka when they're behind the bar when it's really busy, because they're happy to speak stuff, but if you try and throw suggestions about how you do something better, it'll throw them off. Or it was one of those things of where I found it so much easier just to focus my attention on every little detail when I was doing that. And it's not the same for everyone. Some people absolutely love going on to dispense stations, but it's about communicating and sitting down and having these conversations with your staff. And sometimes maybe an after shift close, sit down for a little bit and actually go, how was your shift? Did you have a bit of aftercare with some of your shifts? Like what went well today? What could have been better? What can we improve on? And stuff like that.
Briefs and debriefs.
Yeah.
It's very hotel bar structure is that pre-service you'll have a brief for every day. If you've got a hotel above you, you have many things going on around you. So you have lots of bedrooms upstairs, lots of guests around, multiple venues doing multiple things. But if you have a brief for your day, you know what's going on forward. Then at the end of service, having a debrief about how was the service, anything that happened, anything we should be talking about as a collective to keep an eye on for the next service, but also at the same time highlighting, which is something that I know from my neurodivergent brain, is highlighting what went well. Because if you just focus on we need to get better, the pressure mounts.
Yes.
Whereas if you go, well, actually today this was really great. This particular section, say it was point, was well managed. There was lots of great guest interactions, or dispense was flying drinks out. Whatever the good points were, they're so important to bring up, because then if there is feedback, it's much easier to take those things professionally after a positive conversation than taking it personally, which is usually what happens after a negative conversation.
Yep.
And it's one of the biggest learnings I've had, and weirdly came from a YouTube video of Gordon Ramsay talking about it. But the biggest learning I've had in the last 3-4 years is taking things professionally, not personally. This industry is all about people, so that's not the easiest thing to do. But when you take things personally, it's a weight you carry. And with a neurodivergent brain, you already have a lot going on in there. If you add more weight to carry, the slower you can move forward. Whereas if you take things professionally, it's taking it in the workspace, work environment, and also at the work time. You don't carry those things around with you, and it helps those steps grow forward. So what I found with my team as well is taking feedback is crucial for growth, but taking feedback as professional feedback is so key. Because some people you may turn around and go, end of shift, okay, cool, this is what we did well. Dispense struggled at this time for this reason that we seem to see. The person who was on dispense may take that very personally because they were running that section. It's not one person's fault. The entire collective had an issue in service. That's it. It's not the person had an issue. The venue, the team, the evening had an issue. We fixed that issue as a team and move on.
Yeah. But teamwork makes a massive difference.
100%.
And again, as you say, with neurodivergent, we have a lot on our minds ourselves. I think I know I'm very guilty of, I will take, because I see my work as a high standard, and anything that's wrong with it, I take personally. And I really struggle to separate the two apart, especially because we live in an industry where you're spending more time with these people than you probably do with your family and other people outside of it. And whether it's texting, like the amount of times I've been out of work and answered a text, answered an email, or just like that because someone's texted me and I'm like, well, I'm just going to apply because I can fix that. And you become close with that and stuff like that.
Well, when we're talking about communication and such like that is something that I was saying earlier, I had to learn how to maneuver from being a bartender and having the management communicating to
So
me
different.
to having to flip to the other side of that, and also really learning that, like you say, communicating with the whole team. I can be quite bad at getting into a bit of an individual track and sort of not taking into account what's going on around me. Like you say, perfectionism is definitely an issue that I've had to deal with, where I set very, very high standards for myself that I struggle to reach. And I have to remember to be gentler on the team who I maybe haven't communicated. My brain is telling me that this is a really high standard, and I don't want them to feel like they're being attacked if I question how or why they're doing something. Quite often it's an innate curiosity, because we all think differently, of going, oh, they've approached this task in a different way than I thought they were going to, or I had sort of planned out in my mind. And to learn not to be frustrated by that and go, oh, they didn't do it that way, but maybe I didn't communicate clearly to them that I've set down. Equally, not everybody's going to be perfect all the time. I'm having to learn to be a lot gentler on myself, and that equally has really translated well into being a lot gentler with the team. And you're right about providing good feedback, because I know myself at points of frustration when your bar's busy and the customer's complaining about something or other.
Service.
Yeah.
It can affect the whole service. Whereas if you go, right guys, this situation's happened, this is how we're dealing with it, but you guys did really well at this today, or this is what's going on. I find communicating throughout the shift really beneficial, so that we all know exactly what
Yeah.
page we're on.
I think that's communicating in service is normal,
Yeah.
but it's communicating the right things in service.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
when you drop that like slightly negative seed of like a moment of frustration, and one quick sentence can completely flip a mood
Yeah.
of a room. And our job at the end of the day, yes, we all love making crazy cool tasty cocktails. We're in the business of people, and if a person within your team has had a negative interaction, or has had a negative turn into a frustrating path within a service environment, it can drag the atmosphere down. And it's not because they're doing it intentionally, but that weight can not only be felt by your team around you, but
Yeah.
also by your guests. And ultimately, that's not what they're there for. So when I do debriefs after service, it's because it's trying to keep service as service. It's almost having them as two separate mindsets. And also, to an extent, for me, in the way my brain works, two separate languages. So in service, and this is something that we do quite a lot as a team, we try and have feedback sessions and have meetings to discuss these kind of things. I call everybody chef. Everyone will have a comment about that, I'm sure. But if I call everyone chef, it's not because I don't identify you as how you want to be identified. Is that I want everybody in the service environment to be identified when talking about a job. If I'm going, chef, I need 2 mojitos. It's because in the moment, in service, right now, I need 2 mojitos. It's not because I don't want to call you by your name and I'm not nice. We need to complete the task and keep moving forward. And the more simple ways to communicate that, for me, allows me to function better, but it also makes the boundaries for each team member very clear about how to interact within service as opposed to out with service. Because if you let that moment of frustration take you, and the bar environment we have in Commons Club in Edinburgh, for example, the bar is very small, the bar is like a stage, you can't hide.
Yeah.
If you have one conversation by the till for a teammate going, why didn't you put through the old fashioned? Everyone's going to hear it and everyone's going to feel it. But if you go, is the old fashioned off the table too? No, could you put the old fashioned off the table too, please? That's it. Make it super simple. Take the emotion out of it, take the frustration out of it, make it about task completion. The focus levels can completely change.
No, 100%, I agree. And like, I found that it was really interesting to me sometimes, because so when I went to go join the army at 18, I got initially rejected because I was autistic. And I moved down to Cardiff, worked for the Alchemist, helped open it up, and essentially got point where I was confident enough, I tried again, reapplied, got letters to say that I could easily work, stuff like that. And one of the things I enjoyed when I was in my military service, it was only basic training, but it was just stuff like that. You like, it's so easy to become personally attached to stuff, especially when you start negative comments, stuff like that. But if you're just like, chef, I need this, yeah, chef, heard on it. Like, as for someone who's autistic, for myself and the way I think, if I don't feel the emotion behind it, and I can just use that's clear cut neutral language. You want job done, I will get that job done. It's because I very much am a person of, I get this done, next task, done. It's easier. And the only thing I struggle with is when people start, why have you not done that? Or a little shouting, or I don't care much if a guest shouts at me, but I find it really stressful if a member of staff starts shouting at me and complaining to me like, oh, I'm busy with this, I can't do that right now. Instead of just that, give me 5 minutes, I'll come back, let me just finish this task.
And it's exactly that. It's simplifying it down to a point where I'm not saying language for dummies, because that's not the angle. It's more, how do we make this the most effective way to accomplish the goals we are all setting out for the day? And whether that's live in service, running around, it's mental busy, or whether it's we need to deep clean the bar, same principle.
Yep.
But also at the same time, it allows scope for starting on a neutral base, a very clear-cut language, to then be able to adapt and add in layers to what your team reacts to best, how they respond, how they think, how they work, because you can design the way you communicate around the people you have. I'm very lucky, I have quite a diverse team in Edinburgh, neurodivergent and neurotypical. We all work differently, so the best way for us to understand how we work is to start at the same base we can all agree on, because then you can move collectively to find what works best for everybody, instead of going, this person works that way, this person works that way, this person works that way. We're going to try and force that all together and see if it works, because normally that doesn't work very well.
Yeah.
But I think as well, the importance, changing topic slightly, is the awareness of team management and business of the people you have within them.
Yeah.
So if you've got key leaders who are neurodivergent, and statistic I don't know yet is accurate. I was listening to a podcast called The Hidden 20%, which is founded by Ben Branson, the founder of Seedlip. Fantastic podcast. There was an episode where he had Heston Blumenthal on, who is ADHD and bipolar diagnosed. And Ben Branson said a comment in the podcast which stood out more than any other fact, and I don't remember much about the rest because I was so focused on the one, that potentially over 50% of the hospitality industry is neurodivergent, and that's amazing to me, because that makes me think this industry has so much potential to thrive with the right tools and information in place for us to understand how to work best with neurotypical and neurodivergent brains. And that's so cool because it makes it so special. And what I really want to know is how other businesses manage it. But I think statistically, we need to find that out, because it's a tool to help us build success for not only the industry as a whole, but individual teams and people that maybe have felt excluded in the past, maybe have felt like they don't have the tools to succeed, maybe also don't know how to navigate through the industry because of the way they think. I know it can be very intimidating in lots of new environments, moving to new cities. Like you moved down to London from Aberdeen, you've moved around a few venues, you've just moved into a management position. I've moved from London to Edinburgh to Aberdeen to lots of different places. And that can be an intimidating task in itself, but if you have all the tools there as a collective, as an industry, to help people, however they think, to best acclimatise to a new environment, the better the success can grow for the entire industry.
Yeah.
Right.
I've definitely worked in, like, as a bartender, I've worked in a couple of venues where, on one hand, like the positive parts of my ADHD were sort of celebrated, but it was also almost in a negative term as well, because the parts of me that were celebrated were the fact that I would hyper focus on something, that I'm very detail orientated. I've said before, if you want I can do the job well, you either get it done well or you get it done fast. I was like, if you want it done fast, it's not going to be done really well, but if you want it done really well, I can do it. But equally, I was then chastised for, my ability. I have real problems with judging time. And I would sometimes be late. Time blindness is such a huge issue. And I would, spend 20 minutes sweeping the floor when I was supposed to spend 5 minutes. And then I was sort of chastised for that. And that put me in a really negative sort of frame of mind. And I felt like I wasn't really understood within that. And it was like, well, on one hand, yeah, you're good at this, but you're not good at this. And it actually put a dampener on me progressing
Yeah.
because I felt like I couldn't do the tasks. I couldn't do the paperwork because I struggled to concentrate on it. I couldn't be trusted to open a venue at 9 a.m. because I really struggle with sleep. But equally, now I'm in a different role and I know that I have to navigate this, that I have got a couple of members of staff who have started going, well actually, in you talking about your ADHD a lot, has made me sort of look at how I think and how I do things, and maybe I don't have that same thinking, or I really actually resonate with how you deal with this side of it, whereas somebody else is like, totally do not get how your
It
brain
initiates
works with
curiosity, right? It
Yes.
initiates people going, huh, why do I do things that way?
that. Yeah.
Or why do you do things that way? Why do we both do that, but then we do something different? And it's so funny because it can happen with both neurotypical and neurodivergent brains, where people will see stuff that you do. You'll see someone who does a really smart bar trick behind a bar, right? The busy night, and they do something super clever that like saves so much time, and you're like, crazy cool. Then at the same time, you see someone else doing something that takes longer, but the end result is better, and you're like, it just becomes a very amazing matrix of information. But when you feel like you can't accomplish what is perceived to be basic tasks, that's really difficult, especially when that comes from external validation of can or can't complete task. It's very hard, especially moving into management.
Yeah.
Something
Very,
I've
very
had
difficult.
my whole life. Like I've actually had said to managers in moments of frustration where they've been like, well, how come you could be on time this day but you weren't on time this day, or how come you could do this? And I found it very frustrating because I couldn't communicate it to them. And I actually did say to somebody at one point, right, well, speak to my old uni lecturer, speak to my college, speak to my family, speak to my friends. They'll all tell you that she's going to be 5 minutes late, but she's on her way. But like, that's it. Or
It's
when she gets here, she'll be on it.
Yeah,
But
100%.
like, until that time, we're just waiting.
It's interesting though, like, this is something I really struggled with when I first started being a manager, was some tasks, it's easy, cool, you don't always do it. But there was some other tasks that I couldn't easily accomplish, and I didn't know how to ask without it making me look essentially, like, I use the word stupid, but essentially that's how I felt. Because I went, I don't know how to ask that more senior person, because the way they're going to speak to me is really going to put me off, because I know they're not going to understand. They're going to be condescending a bit. In like, sometimes people don't even mean it. They just, it's the way they go, what do you mean? And like cash ups, for example, I hate doing cash ups, and it was because physically counting out, like, so I ran a bar with an outdoor space and upstairs, and our cash flow was £400. And every Sunday it'd be quiet. One of the other managers would always open up every single bag, and like a bag of £5, like £5 out of 5p, stuff like that. And you, like, every night I'd have to go up an hour before we close and start closing the bags off, because whilst they can do a cash up in 20 minutes, for me to do a cash up would take about 40 minutes, because it would just take longer. I just had to be more precise because I wanted to make sure every detail was right, and I didn't want to, if there was a mistake, I was going to get a text about it the next day going, this isn't good enough, why is this being like that? So I was so meticulous about what I was doing. But she could never understand why my closes took longer, and they'd always take a bit longer than theirs. Like, and I never had the chance to turn around and be like, well, actually, these are the things I find difficult, and I'm the only manager right now for the last 2 hours, and I've got to do 2 cash ups. And I can close the downstairs bar, but by the time I've done that, make sure it's closed, make sure the checklists are done, and I've not missed anything. Because as well, it's so easy to feel like I can get really blinded by tasks. Like, if my brain is trying to do so much, I can walk through a bar on a close and go, I can't see anything. And I think it was interesting, I've been reading a few books at the moment around neurodiversity, and one of them was we need to allow for human error, like just a little bit of, you haven't, I don't know, put something like, you haven't put something back in its right place at the end of the night. Again, it's a close. You're trying to clean the whole venue, and often we don't have the right. You have an hour or an hour and a half max to, because now you stop serving, you're no longer making money, and it's about getting it closed, everyone out, and you've got to mop, you've got to clean, you've got to do stock, you've got to do refill, you've got to do cash ups. Again, there's so much little things, and again, it feels like when you're the only person doing closes for like maybe a couple months straight, and it feels like you're so worried about who the morning person is going to be and what they're going to say in the group chat.
Yeah, I think the pressure again of that external validation, positive or negative, is always something that I think neurodivergent brains feel.
Yeah.
Because validation for us really helps boost things like serotonin, dopamine, changes our brain chemistry, and that's really important for us to function, especially ADHD. But the other side of that is that, again, that communication part of understanding your strengths and weaknesses. I've got a little tattoo on my arm that says play your aces. That's not because I'm a gambling human. Cards would completely screw with my brain. But knowing who you have around you and what they're good at can really help you maximize those moments of frustration.
Yeah.
So for example, a couple of my bartenders know it takes me longer to do a cash up, that's fine. It takes me longer to write a handover, that's fine. But then if they know that, then we set up the day for success, where if we've got a quieter day, we'll start pre-closing earlier, we'll get ahead of the game when we've got that moment of time. Stock's already done, we've already closed down a couple of sections. What are the bits that we can put in place so that when I need to step off, in a small team, one person stepping off for a close can cost it. When I step off, they're in a place where they're ahead of the game, so then I can take that time and not feel rushed. But also at the same time, I don't then feel like, okay, I'll stay and close everything down with you guys, the bar will be shut, swept, mopped, all that kind of nonsense, checklists all filled in, you guys have gone home, okay cool, now I'm starting my manager close, which will then add another 45 minutes onto my close time. And I got asked a lot, why do you always clock out later than the rest of the team? So, well, I know you have to do cash up and stuff, so it takes longer, but why does it take so much longer? And it's because we've had days where we can't get ahead, because we've got pumped and it's been super busy.
Exactly that.
And that's just the way it is. And that is a mindset that is currently in hospitality, because it is ultimately business bottom line led, and managers in those positions, that's their job, is to make sure the numbers align and everything makes sense. But there isn't that awareness of people in the industry as much at the moment, which I think would be really important to set up tools and systems for success. For example, I think cashless businesses for neurodivergent brains, a breeze. Receipts, envelope, reports, put it in an email, see you later. Done. Do I need to count 5p's? No! No thank you. And that can change the perspective not only of a business model, but also for people with neurodivergent brains and going, oh, I'm a manager with experience, I've worked in a venue where there's lots of cash, I really struggle with that. Maybe I should ask the question in an interview or when looking for other roles, are you a cashless venue? Yeah. To keep that in mind, because you know how that might reflect your performance, but also how it might reflect how you can best support the team and the business.
But it's interesting you say that, because the rest of my cash up was fine. Because card machine, great, I have a dojo, it tells me everything.
Yeah, exactly. All of these things, technology is there to assist. Where we need to understand and grow, I think, is understanding how we best structure rotas, structure shift patterns, but also then have businesses. I'm not saying model a business after a neurodivergent brain, because that's not realistic.
Chaos.
It's pure chaos. But understanding, if you do have neurodivergent thinkers in your team, and even if they're managers, not managers, where do they thrive? Where do they excel? How do they perform best? For example, one of my bartenders is a neurodivergent thinker, and he is best placed either on dispense, where he just drinks go out, or he's on the floor running around and he's in that zone. Everyone has their own individual flow states, neurotypical or neurodivergent, and everybody's going to be different. Where everybody thrives, again going back to the play your aces, if I look at a brief plan for like a Saturday shift, I know where my aces are. So I'm going to go, okay, cool, you're going to be on the floor because I know what you're going to rock out today. You're going to be on bar support because you can multitask and have conversations, clean glasses and restock a fridge at the same time. I can't do that, you can. I'm going to be on dispense because I know I can control all the pace of the room and the drinks, or I can put you on dispense and I can float and manage the room because you understand the people around you. the business we're in is a business of people, not only the people we serve as our patrons and our guests, but the people that we work with. And I think it's so interesting that the industry has a potentially not confirmed statistic of half of it being a neurodivergent type, and yet all the communication and structure and understanding isn't there.
Yeah. No, I completely get where you're coming from.
It's quite interesting as well, because I didn't really learn about my ADHD until I was already in hospitality, and I'd worked a bunch of different
What a discovery.
industries and jobs and all sorts, and I was saying, oh, this is probably why I wasn't great in the gambling industry. Because,
or when you're sitting there going, why was I so good on dispense tonight? And then the floor the night before was a shambles.
Yeah.
What happened?
yeah, and I worked at a call centre at one point, and that was when I was quite young when I did that. It was late teens, early 20s, and that really sort of made me go, oh, I can't sit in an office. I can't sit in front of a computer. I can't be tied to a desk where literally you had to clock out at the exact time for your break, and you had to clock into that till again or that phone again 15 minutes later. If you were 3 minutes over because something distracted you in the break room,
Totally.
then you were penalised. If you were sick, and it counted as sick if you were 15 minutes late. Sometimes I at that time didn't live in Aberdeen, so I'd get the bus in. Occasionally I'd mistime the bus, I'd get in 3 minutes late. By the time I got to my desk, I was counted as a sick, penalised, disciplinary, and that really just didn't work. And it was quite interesting when I did get into hospitality, and when I did start learning about ADHD stuff, to go, oh, this is why I feel really comfortable here, because I'm body doubling with somebody that's generally
All
always
the
sitting
time.
on the bar.
You're on shift with many people doing the same thing.
Yeah,
We're
but
all
there's
making drinks and serving
routine
people.
with variety.
Mhm.
So I've learned that yes, the ADHD brain is very, very hypocritical. On one hand, you need a strict structure, but equally, you will find every way to break out of that structure because you don't want to be in
The
a
most
strict
natural
structure.
rebels in the world are people with ADHD. You must follow a timetable. Nah, I'm not gonna do that.
And that's what's quite interesting with now having to be the manager is I'm writing the rota, and having to stick to my own timetable is quite an interesting change.
Good challenge, right?
I know the bar has to be open at 5 o'clock to the public, so that's the overriding. This is your structure. You have to be open by 5.
This is the line.
However, I've staffed myself in at 4 o'clock. I know I should be there at 4, but if I'm in at 4:05, bar still gets opened at 5. If I'm in at 4:15, I maybe get a side task, and then suddenly I've got 5 minutes to open the bar. It's quite an interesting dichotomy, but then I think that has put me in a good stead that I have some staff members who are neurodiverse, some that aren't, to be gentler on them if they message me and go, Lisa, I'm running late, I'm going to be 5 minutes. Cool, no
The
worries.
chaos
it's
of
all
being
good.
late in an ADHD brain
It's awful.
is like a tornado. You
And that-
immediately, like, it could be 5 minutes that you're behind schedule, and that feels like 5 hours, and you go 1,000 miles an hour to catch up, and you actually get in 10 minutes to spare, and you sat there like,
I actually
but
had
it's
a-
all fine. And it's when you understand your team, it's so interesting to then know, okay, cool, the message running late, and they're still 55 minutes before they start. You're going, okay, they're running late, which means they're going to probably be on time, but they're going to be flapping when they come in the door. Cool, no problem, easy. But you get to understand patterns, right? And then as well, learning about a rota for you, if you know that you've got a pattern of 2-3 weeks in a row where somebody's messaged you every single time they're on a 3 o'clock start going, I'm going to be late, maybe I'm going to put you on the 4 o'clock start.
Yeah.
Just to take that pressure off. And then that completely changes the dial, and they go, actually, they've not been late at all this week because their shift patterns changed, not to sacrifice the business, but just move things around to make it work.
It would have been nice to have had that understanding as
Years
a
ago?
bartender
Yep,
in
100%.
different roles. I remember having a meeting with an owner, and he was very much like, well, how do you feel when you're late? And I was like, and it was the first time anybody had ever actually asked me that. It was framed in a negative way because previous to that it was, how do you think the team feel when you're late? They're waiting on you, and it was very
Put the
negative.
blame on you.
But when he
Yeah.
asked me, I went, I actually feel terrible. I feel rushed, I feel panicked, I feel stressed, all before I've even stepped in the building.
Yeah.
I'm already on the back foot, and I feel like sometimes that we would overcompensate. We work extra hard and we push ourselves further than maybe another member of staff would, because they would know in their heads, I've worked 10 hours today, I'm going to go home, cook myself a nice nutritious meal and get to bed at a reasonable time. Whereas I would be thinking, I was late today, I need to make up that time, I need to prove my worth here. And I don't ever want anybody to feel
Like that.
way.
100%.
I think that's why it's good talking about individual teams, but that's where that understanding really needs to be higher up in businesses and how they structure, because you do find that lip service can be paid to, oh yeah, mental health, cool, yeah, we'll support that. But when actually it comes down to the day-to-day business and they go, well, you're 5 minutes late, or this is affecting us, that mindfulness is gone.
But it's having those
Because it's a
boundaries where you
focus
know
on a
it.
business.
And
Yeah.
that's sometimes really hard. And being a manager now, I'm only maybe 2-3 years into being a manager. I'm learning that as well, in that there are boundaries for a business that you just can't cross.
Yeah.
And as much as we've just said we are all natural rebels as
Oh, yeah.
neurodiverse brains, it's still workplace rules you have to follow.
Yeah.
And you have to understand more from your side, but then also the business is to understand, okay, how do we best equip this person to be able to not adhere, but to be able to work within these considered confinements to their brain, so that they can understand and make those adjustments for their own schedule, and also even allow them the space to ask that question of, I can't get in at 3 o'clock. Is it possible to start at 4 o'clock and move something around, or whatever it might be?
I think long term that work better for not only the individuals but the businesses as well.
Correct.
Because you can hit a business need and that's it. And again, you're open and honest. You can be like, cool, but your shift patterns could be from the morning up until how about 5, like 6 o'clock. Yeah, okay. And then the person going at 6, and then no one really loses
It's definitely
that.
about framing as well, because I had worked in a venue that opened earlier. I mostly did the evening shifts, but after a while, when I was struggling with the earlier shifts, they were taken away, but it was taken away as opposed to, hey, would it work better for you to just do the
asking
evening?
the question, and sometimes even it could have ended up having that conversation of they've been taken away, or if they ask you, is that, how do you feel about mornings versus evenings?
Yes.
Do you struggle with mornings?
It was
Have you got-
framed negatively. It was very much
There you
like,
go.
you
That's it.
cannot be trusted, so we are taking them from you.
and that's where the stigma, the frustration,
Exactly that.
the negative parts of having a neurodivergent brain can come in, because they've not asked the question. Here's a Ted Lasso quote for you for the day: be
Oh.
curious and not judgmental.
Yeah.
If you're curious about your team, your individuals, and how they think, how they operate, and how they are, not to put a detriment to the business, but how do they best make them fit into the business best they can. Reality as well, so is not to be negative, but two sides of the coin. It may be that this particular person might not fit with that particular business they're in, and they don't know it.
Yeah.
And if you see it and you say, this may be the wrong business for you, not because we don't think you can do the job, but because you struggle with a lot of the things here more than you can thrive, we might not have the ability to help you thrive more. And the honesty and transparency in that is also another thing that is way further down the line in getting there, but that's another one as well.
Yeah.
I have a side question. Did any of you guys go to university or college?
I did
Yeah.
later on.
Tried college, not for me.
So I left school,
Mhm.
and I could have gone to university with the hires and stuff that I had,
Mhm.
but I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Fair.
And I didn't want to just start a course, say doing English literature, because I liked reading, just because it was expected that I went to university. What I did was I took a college course on in photography, because that's what I was interested in and what I did. But what is quite just at that point, I had no idea about ADHD, but I started having panic attacks and I started really suffering quite badly with depression. And I realised that actually what had happened was I was 18, I'd moved into a flat on my own, I was trying to do college, I was trying to work, I was trying to pay the rent on this flat, and I got overwhelmed.
Yep.
And I couldn't deal with it. Something had to give, unfortunately, because I had to pay rent, it had to be college. So I didn't return to my photography course, I actually left halfway through. And that was a bit of a chip on my shoulder of like, I couldn't complete that. I wasn't good enough to complete that. I didn't have, how come everybody else could handle it and I couldn't?
Well, there you go. That statement right there is how come everyone else can is a really big thing for neurodivergent brains. When I was younger, especially in high school and when I attended college and it didn't go well, the expectation that society has of people to follow the yellow brick road, you do school, you do higher education, you do job. Cool, doesn't mean that's what you have to do. Everybody has their own path, and it's so key to understand that it's really hard because that weight you carry for a long time. Because you go, I failed at that, rather than I've found what I'm better at and what I'm best suited to do.
Well, what's quite interesting is that I landed up then working in the gambling industry because I needed a full-time job. I had a friend that worked there, and she was like, I can help you get into this. She's still one of my best friends. I call her the caretaker of my life. She will be the one that when my phone is broken and I go, oh yeah, I'll sort that out, she will physically take me to the shop and stand and make me do it. And
it's body
stuff
doubling
like
again.
that, exactly
body
that.
doubling.
She knows I struggle with paperwork, stuff like that. She will help me do these things. But anyway, she got me this full-time role doing that. It meant that I could save some money, get out of debt, make sure I wasn't going to get kicked out my flat. And I was able to actually travel a little bit, which I'd never been able to do before. I went away to Spain for a bit. I came back, decided to look for Spanish night classes. I landed up enrolling in an art course at college. Did that for a couple of years, then got into art school. But what was quite interesting about saying I went into university later on, I thought, oh, I'm in a much better stead for this. Still completely unaware of ADHD. I was having some issues with addiction problems at that point, with alcoholism and other things that apparently are very key.
The world's most fanatic addicts, neurodivergent brains.
Yes, for
Because
sure.
it's all dopamine.
But as soon as I got into university and I was at art school, I was like, right, I've got into this uni course. I felt a great immense pressure to finish that course, to my detriment, because I was still struggling with depression, anxiety. I was diagnosed with dyspraxia when I was at uni. But even at the time, I was one of the oldest in my class at 26, 27, kind of going, oh, I should have done this when I was 18. There was still that woulda, coulda, shoulda in my head. As soon as I left uni and started bartending, it was interesting how that mentality changed slightly. Of going, okay, yeah, I was at uni later, but it taught me this, and I got through it and I got my degree, and I wished I could start it all over again with the mindset of knowing how it worked and how the thing was.
But you got your degree, and that's amazing.
Yeah, but that took that chip off my shoulder of I finally completed a course. I got this degree, and then it was almost seen as a negative when I did go into bartending from the art world, which was quite strange.
Well, that's a different societal conversation entirely.
Yeah, you're not doing art anymore, you're just a bartender. And I was like,
Oh, is that right?
I think you'll find that
How
this
would you
is
like
my
your pint,
career
sir?
now. Yeah.
Interestingly enough, I actually really struggle. I wouldn't be able to easily go do a university degree because I don't have the right maths or English qualification, because I really struggle with it in school. And one of the big reasons why I struggle with it is academically I can know the knowledge, no worries. Again, I'm talking about stuff like this. But if you ask me to sit down and write you an essay, something like that, I probably really struggle. Not because I don't understand it, but because I don't know how to write the format it needs to be in. And I've had conversations with people being like, oh, but you can do a course to learn that. And I really don't think people understand. Going, no, I physically look at that. I don't know. Like, you give me something that needs to be, oh, you need to rephrase that. I will look at it and go, I don't know what you're on about. My brain will not pick up. I think it's very much because it is just written text. My brain will not pick up a mistake in it. I can't easily identify it. And often because there is barriers like, for example, with mathematics, you go do National 5. So I was quite lucky that I did life skill maths, I only did it in Natural 4 because Natural 5 you can't use a calculator. Like, to me, I'm like, that's really doesn't make sense. It's really stupid. If I'm going to do this in my everyday now day to day, I would use a calculator for this, and I would use tools that would help me throughout this. And often in higher education, you are not allowed to use certain tools that will help you. And even though you start working at a job, and again, it's like bartending. I've worked in some bars that you would have a spec sheet in front of you with everything. There were things out there now that you would easily be able to use in your job because it's a business, they need to make money. It's going to do whatever is the best way for you to accomplish a goal. But in an academic sense, it's not there. And again, it's things like that. Or economically, I would struggle now to go back and do that because I'd have to go through college for a couple of years or the uni. And there are some things out there, but again, it's one of the ones of where also I feel like with what I've achieved now in the industry, I haven't needed to. My lived experience and working alongside people has really given me a lot better knowledge and stuff like that. And yeah, I can research stuff, write about it now, and educate. I'm great with this. But it's just the fact that I've done so some of the best times of when I've talked about making cocktails, and again it goes back to something you said earlier about starting at the very start and seeing the whole journey. I find it easier now to, like, when in Kalu I was using the back room, Simone used to really love how detail oriented everything I was. I was like, well, we sat together making up all these cocktails together. I'm so detail oriented because people ask me, they want to know what's inside it. I'll be honest, and through honesty and transparency and just seeing stuff, it's so imprinted in my brain. I go, I understand that. I understand this because I went to a tasting. This person told me I understand what they're talking about, or I've been to a distillery. I've seen this work. My brain now retains that information. But I still look up stuff sometimes because even though I go, I've been told that 5 times, I think I'm pretty sure I know it, but I will still like to look something up just to make sure that I'm right.
The incredible thing about the world we live in now, we can do that with these things.
Yeah, it's so easy to just go, right, how do I sort that out? What's in this?
Exactly.
What's that?
Oh, Google, what's that?
Yeah.
Amazing.
But yeah, no, and yeah, just to wrap up, again, it's been great to see all this grow, and it's great to understand everyone's own journeys and stuff like that. I'm very thankful to, again, it's interesting of where I've not met more LGBT, hospitality people, more queer, neurodivergent, supporting women events, stuff like that. It's also great to see that I'm not the only one who actually struggles with this, and you start meeting other people.
You are not alone.
No,
Yeah.
and this is a bigger thing, and if you ever feel discriminated, feel attacked, stuff like that, or a manager is gaslighting, not imagine necessarily, but you're being gaslighted, just know that there are actual things in place to either stop that or generally be like, no, that's not okay. Because I think in the future of the industry, we cannot keep going, oh, it's tough work, or this is a bit shit, or you just put up with it. And it's absolutely not the way. I think you need to have a healthy route to watch plants grow fully. If you do not have that healthy, looked after base and root and foundation, then you can never fully grow. And if you want not only a business to grow, but as people and stuff like that, we're not here to work in one business forever. It never happens. But one thing that I found really important with as manager is, like, I want to give these people the skills so they can accomplish the goals here, and this will hopefully lead them on to bigger things. And if they want to have a conversation going, a big, as a proportion of our industry of students, we know they might love the industry, they might fall in love with it, they might not, they might want to take their use of degree. All our job is just make sure that we've given them the right tools for life to move forward. And I think organisations like Equal Measures, or being an intersectional group that supports LGBT, neurodivergent, and people from minority backgrounds, but is accepting to all, They're there to give mentorships, to give qualifications such as personal licenses, WSETs and spirits. And if I knew from a younger age, actually when I knew 4 years ago that I actually quite like doing my WSET and maybe I want to become an instructor or an educator next year, I would have had a bit of a different time. Instead of trying to bartend, I read a few books, did a few cocktail competitions, and thought that was the way I needed to do and make great cocktails and be a manager and stuff like that, because I knew knowledge. It wasn't that. I realised, ironically, through going through a bit of a downfall to start again, to actually know what I want to do is help other people. I find that there's a real interesting root of, it was actually because there was a lot of misinformation, or people just we don't really talk enough about the fact that this is a career job. There was actually a lot of really good things you can do in it. Again, Healthy Hospo now have an app you can learn. Paddy from Let's Talk. You've got the Drinks Trust, Hospitality Action, stuff like that. There is the Ben in Scotland as well. You've got Hospo Hang down in Glasgow. There is not only organisations but initiatives, people's talking about this stuff. You've got the Adam Cole project from Caitlin doing that. I think there are some really great initiatives out there that are there to support everyone, no matter where you're from, what background, stuff like that. We are an industry, a community that is here to support, look after, foster and grow. And I think if you're not doing that, and if you don't, I'm not saying we all have to go out and do stuff like what I'm doing, but just be more mindful and just,
I think that advocacy for yourself and for your staff and companies, business, actually everybody in general, that having that advocacy there is really, really important, because we have had such a long tradition of we work hard and we work long shifts and we get through it and we're tough and blah blah blah, whereas actually quite a lot of us aren't, and you go home and you cry and go, oh God, I'm sore and knackered, and I wish that I didn't have to do this. And I think, certainly from my point of view anyway, I'm trying to advocate for myself in the same way that I advocate for my staff. And I wouldn't allow them to be abused or overworked as much as I possibly can. I try, when I'm writing a rota, to be mindful not to put people in long shifts or closes into opens, all that kind of thing. And actually having to learn to do that for myself. And then that gets reflected back to upper management or senior or hires in the company, where they go, oh, actually, this is working. These people aren't burnt out, they're not tired, we're not losing staff at a high rate. Just people are advocating for each other as well, which I think is a really good thing that's coming from all these initiatives that you were just talking about. We are much more open and willing to speak than probably we ever have been in this industry.
And it's important there's platforms to do that. And you mentioned loads. Thank you for what you have done to make sure there's a platform as well as Ahsoka. And keep talking. It's the most important thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Again, I hope to keep doing these talks and stuff like that, because I think it all ties them together, and there are some really great people in the industry. And right now, economically, I think we're all feeling the stress and there's pressures and stuff like that. But I think socially, where we are in the industry is a big turning point. And I think give it a couple, 2 to 5 years, we'll see a massive difference. Where the dream is, I remember Paddy saying this to me, in 10 years time, he doesn't want to be having the talks that he's doing now about like healthy eating habits, sleep, stuff like that. He said to me, I remember him saying, it's like, I really hope that in 10 years time that this is done. I'm done with this. We don't have to keep doing these talks, because they will be so systematically within the structures that
it becomes part of the culture of the industry, right? And that's the goal we want.
Yeah. 100%. Does the audience have any questions? Is there anything you guys want to add before we wrap up?
Don't think so.
We've covered quite a few things.
It's been covered.
Thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure to be back again in hometown, and I'm just looking forward to keep seeing this grow. And I'm probably not going to make a platform out of it, because there's a lot of good platforms already, but I feel like working alongside a lot of the things that we're doing, again, supporting equal measures, and again, the hope is I will do these talks because I do think this is actually a big area, and I'd love to see more where it develops. And yeah, no, just it's a pleasure to actually go accept more of who I am, because again, if I had the same mindset when I was younger, I would have had a very different experience now, and I'm very happy for where my life has ended up now. But yeah, there's so much things where I'm like, I really wonder if I could do that now. And now, like, I feel like because I've met so much amazing people, you go, no, I can actually do anything.
Yeah.
But no, thank you all so much. That we
Thank you.
finish up this recording.
You turn off national television.
Yeah.
Oh.